Hello and welcome everybody. Happy Thursday. It's just about 4:24 p.m. and we are live on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and other locations. Hey, if you want to catch future live streams, I think the best way to do that would be to subscribe to our YouTube channel at colememo.com/YouTube. I think that's probably the best way to be sure that you don't miss a future live stream. The last few, including this one, I've done sort of impromptu, but I've been trying to get better about announcing episodes as they go on. Folks, we've got local, state, and federal news today. And by that, I mean local is in Illinois news, state is in some a little bit of Texas news, and some federal drug policy news that we'll be covering in today's episode. Folks, I hope you're doing well. Drop your comments below because we are live. And as we go through the show, we can acknowledge your comments as they come in. Before we get into it, just a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to show you, if you're watching this on YouTube, how to find some of the links that we discuss. I think it's important. I always try to share my sources. And so I'm showing the YouTube stream right now. And if you look under the stream, there's a link that should take you to the show notes, which I probably don't have posted yet. I don't, but I'm going to post them now and show you that the links can be found right here on colememo.com. So I'm going to refresh my screen, and now you can see our first story and some of the other stories we're going to be discussing today. But just wanted to show that to you so that you can find any links that you might be looking for. This is episode 218. You can also just go to thecolememo.com and look up episode 218, and you can find the links that we reference in this show. So we are going to get right into it once again. As I was saying, we've got a little bit of local news, as in Illinois news. We've got some state news with regard to Texas, and some federal news. All of that right here on this episode of
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo is what allows this whole thing to go on.
I mean, you have to respect the memo.
Hey, this is Tommy Chong, and you're listening and watching The Cole Memo.
All right, let's do it, shall we? Cannabis Critique says, let's get it on. Absolutely, let's do it. So the first story here is going to be pretty quick. Next week, Governor Abbott, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, has declared that there will be a special session. And I've declared that we're about to have a special session right now, if you know what I'm saying. I'm just joking. That's a stupid joke. They're going to be discussing they're going to be focusing on a number of things, including some of the natural disasters that have occurred in Texas. You can see that right here. Legislation to improve early warning systems and preparedness infrastructure in flood-prone areas throughout Texas. Cannabis Critique says, Hemp Greg. That's hilarious. But also there's a few different things they're going to be discussing, but you can see one of the bullet points right here is legislation making it a crime to provide hemp-derived products to children under 21 years of age or older. Legislation to comprehensively regulate hemp-derived products, including limiting potency, restricting synthetically modified compounds, and establishing enforcement mechanisms, all without banning a lawful agricultural commodity, which is really crazy to see somebody like Governor Abbott to say. He's acknowledging that this is a lawful agricultural commodity, but maybe we should just rein it in here and, establish some enforcement mechanisms, maybe, limit potency, which I'm fundamentally opposed to. But I think it's just interesting that they're talking about regulating and not banning. Oh, how the times have changed in Texas. So this is going to be starting this Monday, July 21st. And it's safe to say it's going to be interesting. All eyes were definitely on Texas with the with SB3, I believe it was. Man, it's crazy. All this legislation that you have to remember can be hard to remember. So SB3, I believe, was vetoed by Governor Greg Abbott. I will say that if you want to learn more about everything that I'm discussing, once again, in the show notes, which I'm putting on screen right now, you can learn about the latest in Texas cannabis policy with my episode with the Texas Cannabis Collective. So that is something you can check out. And I didn't mean to go back to the veto, but definitely check out those episodes I've done with Texas Cannabis Collective if you're wondering what in the hell is going on in Texas. It's super, super interesting. I will just say that. And with that, folks, let's segue to, some federal drug policy news. Here we go. All right, so federal news. President Donald Trump recently signed the HALT Act into law. And most of the discussion I've seen online is, and you can see this here, Brady Cobb, who you may have heard of. Um, they're they're a pretty big name in cannabis. If you haven't heard them, Google their name. Brady Cobb says glad POTUS signed the HALT Fentanyl Act, meaning making fentanyl a Schedule 1. Real Donald Trump, please reschedule cannabis to Schedule 3 as the HHS recommended so it can be properly researched and provide clemency to nonviolent individuals still serving harsh time for marijuana charges. So it's easy to read these as the same thought because Schedule 3, just to be clear, would not provide clemency to nonviolent individuals serving time for marijuana charges. It would simply it would just simply reschedule cannabis to Schedule 3. Most things, from what I understand from my layman perspective, would stay the same. These programs that exist today would still be operating outside of the structure of the Controlled Substances Act. So in other words, they would still be federally illegal. Here's my thing on this. This is just wrong. And what first keyed me into it was that the reporting, and even I watched this small press conference, even Donald Trump is very careful to say fentanyl related substances. So based on what I could gather, and I'm sharing my post that I made on X the other day, fentanyl itself actually remains in Schedule 2, which means it is a drug with accepted medical uses. I've heard of people using it for surgery or severe pain, but it does have a high potential for abuse. Meanwhile, and this is important context, marijuana, quote unquote, is classified as Schedule 1, while tobacco, alcohol, and hemp are not scheduled at all. So just, the little bit of a little bit of clarity I wanted to provide there, because I've seen a lot of people basically saying that fentanyl is now Schedule 2, that it's now Schedule 1 alongside cannabis. No, fentanyl itself is still Schedule 2. It's fentanyl related substances. And we'll get back to that here in just a moment. But I did find it interesting that there is an alternative registration process for Schedule 1 research in the legislation. And folks, if you'd like to read the legislation, I'll be sure to have that linked in the show notes so that you can read the full legislation. But just more to my point that I made earlier, someone said exactly what I said. They actually said this earlier today. They said, to be clear, illegal fentanyl and analogs are Schedule 1 now. Previously legal and regulated fentanyl remains Schedule 2. And admin.law, which I believe, his name is escaping me right now, but I believe this is one of the people that actually sued the federal government to get some information released on the rescheduling process. So we wouldn't know what we know about what the government has done without this individual. From what I understand, I believe he sued to sort of get this information out. But anyways, he said, correct, no one understands this law like it's a big deal, but for reasons no one whatsoever is talking about, and the things people seem to think they are think are big, they're dead wrong about. I encourage people interested to read the damn thing seriously. And that's the whole reason I bring it up today. There's certainly a lot of chatter about it. Um, I will link the full text of the bill in the show notes so that you can learn more. Um, Cannabis Critique says, and with his big ass stupid marker, like the toddler he is. And he also said, yeah, they give it to people in the hospital all the time. It's wild. Yeah, I mean, I had somebody really close to me that just recently went through surgery, and they're like, Cole, I did fentanyl, and it was awesome. They didn't say that last part. I was just trying to be funny. But so status quo for fentanyl more or less remains the same. It's those fentanyl related substances, fentanyl analogs that apparently are Schedule 1 right now. And I know that we're all opposed to fentanyl. Nobody seems to like fentanyl, and that's okay. I don't have any partiality to fentanyl, but what I will say is that I don't believe fentanyl would be as prevalent as it was if not for the drug war. This is a concept called the iron law of prohibition. And, you know, I don't think heroin, fentanyl, or a lot of these deadly substances, oftentimes deadly substances, would be used if it weren't for the drug policies that exist. I think people would gravitate towards the natural option, which is less harmful. I'm not saying it's harmless, but it's less harmful than these really concentrated forms of opiates, opium. I'm a little bit out of depth here, but what I will say is look up the iron law of prohibition, and there's a lot to learn there. So, Two Dope Dubes, thank you for tuning in. You tuned in just at the right time because we're about to segue to some Illinois news. Folks, you tuned into the film. All right, in Illinois cannabis news, we're going to front load this segment with a new article that came out on hemp. So this is from Capital News, Illinois, and the headline is Intoxicating Hemp Remains Unregulated in Illinois Following Legislative Inaction. So I will have this linked in the show notes. It's a great article. I don't think I'm going to go through all of it, but I'm going to go through some of it. So hemp farming has been legal and regulated in Illinois since 2018 when lawmakers passed the Industrial Hemp Act. And that was also federally, I should mention. Oh, and I guess it says that right there. Following federal action that legalized hemp production. The legislation anticipated it would again be used to make industrial products, but also for the production of CBD oils that can be extracted from the plant and are marketed as having therapeutic but not intoxicating properties. And I would just say that that's a really important part. You know, many people will say that the 2018 Farm Bill was only for industrial products, but they specifically added consumable cannabinoids to the definition of hemp. It seems like making both a consumable market and a industrial market was the intent of the law, and the language clearly reflects that. So hemp has since become the subject of a heated debate in Illinois and other states. We mentioned Texas earlier, as the plant has been increasingly used to make synthetic products with intoxicating compounds that are not regulated by the federal government. Those products, known as Delta 8 THC, are permissible due to what some describe as a loophole in the 2018 Farm Bill that legalized hemp production. Some describe it as a loophole. Again, it's pretty clear. It basically says all cannabinoids are, as long as they're derived from hemp, are descheduled, and Delta 9 THC, which most people just call THC, is descheduled up to a threshold, and that threshold is 0.3% by dry weight, which confuses a lot of people, and we can maybe show a graphic here in a moment with regard to what we mean by that. Governor Pritzker has been a vocal opponent of what people call intoxicating hemp, saying it undercuts the state's legal cannabis industry and puts children and teens in harm's way. He's advocated thus far to no avail for regulating intoxicating hemp products, similarly to the state's legalized cannabis industry. But lawmakers failed again to pass legislation regulating intoxicating hemp this year, leaving the industry in limbo until either the state acts or the federal government intervenes first. It marked the third consecutive year that a regulatory bill failed, the latest front in a legislative fight that largely pits the state's legalized cannabis industry against industrial hemp growers. So we'll briefly discuss the difference between hemp and marijuana. This article is slightly wrong, I will say. People reach out to me. I'll help you with your articles. Hemp versus cannabis. That title is just wrong. The legal terms we're discussing is hemp versus marijuana, which are both cannabis but have extremely different legal statuses. The main difference being that marijuana is Schedule 1, potentially going to be rescheduled to Schedule 3, and hemp is descheduled, just like alcohol and tobacco. Again, we're talking about cannabis here. By federal law, if the cannabis plant has a concentration of 0.3% THC or less by dry weight, it's legally considered hemp. If it has more than 0.3% THC, it's considered marijuana. They say it's considered cannabis. That's just incorrect. And not dissing the articles, the article here. Cannabis is the genus of the plant, and it's a scientific term. It's not an arbitrary term like hemp and marijuana, which are completely, they're created in law. They are terms of art. So, both substances were strictly regulated as Schedule 1 under the Federal Controlled Substances Act of 1970 until the passage of the 2018 Farm Bill, which removed hemp from the legal definition of cannabis, thus creating a fully legal hemp market. That part they did get right. So yes, we're going to display a graphic on screen here, and I am just looking for it so that I can share it on screen. I find that this helps to explain what the hell we're talking about with 0.3%, because a lot of people get confused by that. And then we'll start to round out this article and segue to our next piece of Illinois cannabis news, which has to do with how the tax dollars are spent. Super interesting stuff. So the language has been extrapolated to mean that any hemp product with less than 0.3% THC by dry weight is in fact legal hemp. So if you have a gummy and most of the gummy is CBD, gelatin, sugar, and cornstarch, and the rest of the gummy, or just under 0.3% of the gummy is 0.3%, less than 0.3% is THC, then the product is considered hemp. To give you a practical example, I've got this soda right here that has 50 milligrams of THC. And you might be thinking, Cole, that's a lot of THC in a soda. And you might be right. Different people have different tolerances, but the point that I'm making is this is a product that you might find in a dispensary, a 50 milligram drink. But I had it delivered directly to my door because while these 50 milligrams of THC might seem like a hefty dose, that is still less than 0.3% of everything that is in this container. And thus, this is hemp. And I'm saying that in air quotes. Call it hemp. I call it descheduled cannabis because this is what cannabis would be like if it was descheduled. And it is in the form of hemp. So, anyways, I think it's important to sort of illustrate what we're talking about and what it actually means, because it's frankly, it's silly, but beggars can't be choosers, and we've been begging for relief from these drug policies for years. And if you're going to tell me that I can get a soda that has 50 milligrams of THC delivered to my door so long as I call it hemp, well, then I'm going to call it hemp. That's what I'm gonna do. And I think all of us would have done that in the past if we were presented with this option, you know. But I digress. Two Dope Dude says shotgun it on stream. So hey Cole, where can I get some yummy soda? Hey Aaron, or Two Dope Dudes, which you should subscribe to on YouTube. You can go to drinkcantrip.com/Cole Memo. And folks, they don't just have 50 milligram sodas. I like the 50 milligrams because they pack a punch. Sometimes I'll like just mix a little bit into a drink, almost treat it like a whiskey. But they do have lower dose drinks. If 50 milligrams is just absolutely ridiculous from your perspective. They've got 3 milligram drinks, 5 milligram drinks, 10 milligram drinks. They've got sodas, seltzers, Dr. Peppers, all this stuff. And they don't use artificial flavoring. They use sugar cane. So definitely check it out. I think they've even taken out the coloring from their sodas. They're just going, all natural. And if you go to drinkcantrip.com/Cole Memo, you'll get a 15% discount. 15% of that will also be kicked back to me in the form of in-store credit, of which I will use to buy more soda. So great way to support the show and support yourself with some awesome products. Dr. Danknuts says, hey Cole, what's up? How's it going? Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate you all. And Cannabis Critique says, the circle of life. So we're going to get back to this story, and then we're going to talk about how our tax dollars are spent, those Illinois cannabis tax dollars. So that's hemp, and that's fun. And the question is, should it be regulated or banned? And the Wards, who have grown hemp on their 6th-generation farm since it was legalized in 2018, and I believe have made appearances on the Cole Memo in the past. I'm pretty sure I've had Justin on the show. Pretty confident about that. They're in the camp that would like to see the intoxicating hemp industry more strictly regulated, but not outright banned. As president of the Illinois Healthy Alternatives Association, a trade association and lobbying group for hemp farmers, Justin Ward has made regular trips to Springfield to advocate for increased hemp regulation. According to Ward, new regulations should include state-mandated testing to ensure hemp products are compliant with federal regulations and free of toxic contaminants, sold in child-safe packaging and labeling, and have a minimum age requirement at the point of sale. Everything we grow meets that standard, Ward said. At Stony Branch Farms, the Wards sell both non-intoxicating and intoxicating forms of hemp, including Delta 8. They said the cultivation, processing, and packaging and marketing of their products is all done in-house. So, a bill to make these standards law in Illinois, House Bill 1, was proposed this year with the support of some hemp lobbyists, but continued disagreement among stakeholders over the details of licensing, taxation, and the legal potency threshold of Delta 8 THC caused the bill to stall without being called for a vote, according to the bill's sponsor, Representative Shawn Ford, who has also been on the show in the past. I believe if you go to colememo.com/guest index, you can check out that interview. Representative Shawn Ford also announced earlier this week that he plans to retire from politics. So that's an interesting development. Just a side note, Representative Shawn Ford usually takes most of the drug policy legislation. So I can't help but wonder who will take that going forward. Municipalities are free to ban the sale of hemp-derived products as they see fit, and many have. In Chicago, the city council has approved bans specific to some wards. Tiffany Chappell Ingram, the executive director of the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois, said in a recent statement that regulations are needed to, quote, rein in, end quote, intoxicating hemp. She argues that the hemp industry unfairly undercuts licensed cannabis operators, evades health and safety regulations, and generates little revenue for state programs due to its low tax rate. So, to Tiffany's point, the article lays out an example. For example, while a 3-year license for hemp only costs $1,100, including those initial licensing fees, a license for cannabis costs $100,000 just to apply for a large adult use cultivation license. Then another $100,000 when the license is granted, and each time it is renewed. The state caps large-scale cultivation licenses to 21 licenses and has issued fewer than 100 smaller-scale craft grow licenses at a cost of $40,000. And I don't know if that's one time yearly, but I believe it's like once you get it, and then I believe you have to pay that yearly. When hemp was legalized, many who couldn't gain entry to the cannabis industry took it as an opportunity to produce a similar product without all of the red tape. And I don't know. I think that's a little bit of a misnomer. I think that a lot of these people want, well, okay, I think it's true. It's because the red tape is, there's too much red tape. It's way too regulated. Is hemp underregulated? Perhaps. I've always said that hemp regulation should likely take the form of three pillars. There's a three-pillar approach. And in fact, what I'm about to say, if you've ever gone to a dispensary, you're going to be very familiar with each of these three pillars. The answer to regulating hemp is extremely simple. One, mandate testing, right? You can so basically ensure the products are not only safe from additives, um, you know, any solvents that are used, if you're consuming extract, any pesticides, you don't want that. So we mandate testing. We mandate truth in labeling. The product should contain what it says, what it claims to contain. So if it says that it contains 50 milligrams of THC, it should contain 50 milligrams of THC. By the way, there are QR codes on all of these sodas where these people are testing their products themselves. So that's why I was saying it's a little bit unfair to assume that they're sidestepping all of the red tape. I think they're sidestepping the redundant red tape, the not needed red tape, for lack of better words. So that's the first and second pillar. So mandate testing, mandate truth in labeling. And by the way, if the label's not accurate, that's cause for discussion, for lack of better words. That's a problem. So there's how you deal with anybody that's selling dangerous substances. And then, there's a lot of talk, and including in this article, about the idea that these products are targeted towards teens or young adults. And to that, I introduce you to the third pillar, which is an age gate. In other words, you ID who you are selling cannabis to. And again, you might be familiar if you've ever gone to a dispensary, because this is the approach they take in dispensaries. They ID you as soon as you get in. All of the products are required to be tested, and all of the products are required to be labeled accurately. So I think the solution to this is relatively simple. So let's continue here in the article. So hemp is taxed at a lower rate than cannabis, allowing the industry to price its products more competitively. Yeah, I think that there is some truth in that. But also, Illinois cannabis products are higher before tax than other states. They're getting lower, but they're still higher before tax. I'm higher before tax, but they're still higher. The prices are just higher across the board before taxes. So, I've always said Michigan has been considering this proposal to basically have a similar tax structure to Illinois. And I still think those products would be cheaper because the products before taxes are cheaper. So if you add a tax, like, I still think that's going to be cheaper. But I digress. So Ford, who spearheads the issue of hemp and cannabis regulation each year, kind of like I said earlier, he's retiring soon, and he is running for Congress, but he said that he's definitely done. Like, if that doesn't work out, he is done. And as this article covers, he spearheads the issue of hemp and cannabis regulation each year. He's even taken up psychedelic policy. That's why one of the things I had interviewed him about when he was on my show. He said it's important to balance promises made to current social equity cannabis license holders with any concessions made for hemp. So he's calling for balance. And Ward said, "We want regulations to protect consumers and weed out bad actors, but we don't want to see this thing regulated to death." And that kind of goes back to what I said earlier. So the state legislature hasn't been able to settle the question of whether to regulate hemp-derived products containing delta-8 THC as distinct from medicinal and recreational cannabis, or to treat them as virtually the same substance. And by the way, they are the same substance. I've had Charlie Bachtel, who you might recognize as the CEO of Cresco Labs, on the show in the past. He described hemp products as, quote, truly identical. Um, there was a time when people were trying to say these products were different somehow, but with more and more companies like Cantrip, who use naturally derived THC, there's no synthesis involved at all. As these products became more prominent, because that's what people want, natural D9, natural THC, um, the goalposts shifted, and it's like, oh, it's not that it's a fake product, it's that you don't have to pay the taxes we do, or you don't have to comply with the regulations that we do. And so the goalposts in this debate have sort of shifted. I really like this article because it gives a good background. Like, I know I was kind of nitpicking earlier some of the details that were wrong, but this article does a really good job of sort of rehashing, pun intended, what has happened over the past few years. So, for example, they cover a proposal backed by Pritzker in the 2024 session, House Bill 4293, that would legally define hemp as cannabis and would have made it illegal, completely illegal. And it would have added criminal penalties for anybody who sold cannabis without a hemp license. This article says selling hemp without a cannabis license. But again, if we remind ourselves of the beginning of this segment, hemp and marijuana are both arbitrary terms of art created from law, and cannabis is the plant. Hemp and marijuana are both cannabis. I digress. I apologize for beating that horse to death, but it is important. Pritzker ultimately blamed House Speaker Chris Welch for killing that bill in January. Despite bipartisan support, Welch said at the time the measure didn't have enough votes within his Democratic ranks to pass. And that's something that I heard from advocates on the ground, that the bill just was not, it didn't have the support it needed to make it through the legislature. So let's scroll down, and I think this is an important part of the article. While closed door conversations surrounding hemp regulations have continued, there has yet to be a public hearing on hemp. Representative Sonia Harper, a Democrat from Chicago who chairs the House Agriculture Committee, said the Speaker had not responded to her requests for such a hearing. She said, quote, "I just want to make sure that the voices of those most impacted are heard," end quote. And I think that's one of the most important parts of this story. This is how things in Springfield work. Closed door conversations. We very rarely get a public hearing, and when we do, it's announced the day of, and people all around the state of Illinois, including myself, who is often able to make it to Springfield, can't make it to Springfield. And whether that's by design or whether it's by coincidence, your guess is as good as mine. But these things happen, they happen quickly, and the public is often not given the opportunity to weigh in. And so this isn't unique to cannabis or hemp slash marijuana policy. This is this is an Illinois thing, if you will, these closed door conversations. And it's really important. It's really unfortunate, to be completely candid. From the perspective of an advocate, I find that very unfortunate, that there's not more public discourse with regard to these topics. So, though there has been significant pressure from Pritzker and some advocacy groups to regulate hemp in Illinois, Ford says he's not inclined to rush the process, arguing it needs broader bipartisan support. He said, quote, "We had a problem when we regulated cannabis. We sort of rushed it, and we didn't have stakeholders all at the table. He continued saying, quote, "Some Republicans would say that they were not a part of it," end quote. Apparently, a number of Republicans have recently joined negotiations over hemp legislation, but a compromise still seems far off. I wish I could find the clip of testimony, but I do recall that a Republican gave testimony in the last session, basically indicating they're on board. That while they do not support the legalization of cannabis, they do believe that if hemp is going to exist, it should be regulated like cannabis, if I recall correctly. And that was just one Republican. I've had other Republicans on the show, a couple of Republicans, in fact, that I believe one was Representative Dan Swanson and another was Representative Dan Calkins. I did not mean to have two Dans on the show, but that's just how it worked out. And both of them seem to understand this issue, and that even though at least Representative Calkins, former Representative Calkins, was opposed to the legalization of cannabis, he did admit that from what he understood, these are small businesses participating in hemp, um, and it would be a shame to basically close down the industry to protect folks from the other industry. Um, Really, it should just be kind of open. Is the perspective that I got from those Republicans. But again, that's not universal. Not all Republicans are on board. But I just wanted to make the point that not all are completely opposed. So we've got some good comments rolling in from Two Dope Dudes. I do appreciate you all tuning in. If you haven't already, smash that like button. We're going to round out this story with this last paragraph. And it's something that I've only discussed briefly on the show. I might get a lawyer on the show to discuss it here in the future. But federal changes coming. It's the big question right now. A bill that would apparently end this hemp loophole, as they call it, at the federal level passed through the United States Senate Appropriations Committee on Thursday, July 10th. If that bill becomes law, the cultivation and sale of hemp products containing quantifiable amounts of THC would once again be prohibited under federal law, rolling back the previous allowance of 0.3%. That would deal a devastating blow to the more than $400 million United States hemp industry. I wouldn't be surprised if that number is even larger. I could be wrong. That's a good opportunity for me to plug the recent episode that I did, episode 216, with economist Bo Whitney. And the reason I think it's larger than that, because I believe and we discussed it during this episode, he pegged the Texas market, just the Texas market that we were talking about earlier, at like $7 billion. So the idea that federally it's only a $400 million industry, I don't know, that just must be a different estimate. So before we close the loop on this topic, I wanted to say that, House Bill 1 was mentioned, but there's also a couple of other proposals that I think deserve review. And you can do that by checking out the show notes. I've linked the other proposals alongside the article for you to review. House Bill 64 and House Bill 1775. This is legislation that was introduced by the Illinois Hemp Growers Association, and you can check out the fact sheet provided by the Illinois Hemp Growers Association in the show notes. And I think I'll just close this loop by saying that, there's not only disagreement between people in the marijuana industry and the hemp industry, but there is disagreement in the hemp industry. And so, in covering this story, I kind of discussed that there was House Bill 1, which was introduced by Representative Ford. So that's a piece of legislation. There's also House Bill 64 and Senate Bill 1775. I accidentally said House Bill 1775, but I'm pretty sure it's Senate Bill 1775. I'm just going to double check that really quick. Yeah, I'll put it on my screen right now. It's House Bill 64 and Senate Bill 1775. That's from the fact sheet. I'll get that typo that I had corrected. The point I'm trying to make in closing out this story is that there's not agreement on this House Bill 1 from what I can gather. I recently saw a statement posted from the Illinois Hemp Growers Association where they basically said, you know, Representative Sonia Harper, who was mentioned earlier in this show, has pushed some common sense hemp legislation that protects both consumers and businesses in the state of Illinois. They say that's House Bill 64. And they say, what does it look like? 21 plus to access hemp products, tighter testing and labeling requirements, and expanded industry access for small farmers. So they basically touched on the 3-pillar approach that I discussed earlier. But importantly, they say no new taxes and no new licenses. And they also said, remember, this is a $28 billion industry that Illinois farmers and small businesses deserve access to. So there you go. There's another figure for you. Candidly, I'm reading an online interaction in which there was some disagreement between the Illinois Hemp Growers Association and the Illinois Healthy Alternatives Association. So that's all to say that people, even you might say on the same side, do not agree. It seems like critics of House Bill 1 contend that it adds overly burdensome regulation, that it adds taxes, increases barrier to entry, and they contend, critics of House Bill 1 contend, that that's not needed, that basically we just need to keep things more or less as is, but add that 3-pillar approach structure while maintaining or while allowing small businesses to participate. And I believe the way that they plan to achieve that goal is by removing the zoning requirement that currently exists in the hemp law, so that you don't have to be zoned industrially or zoned as a business in order to acquire a hemp license. You could hypothetically, I could, if House Bill 64 came to be, I could apply for a hemp license. I could grow as much hemp as I want. I could sell hemp products. And that, I think, is the goal of House Bill 64 and Senate Bill 1775. Folks, we're going to close out this show by talking about where Illinois cannabis tax revenue goes. You ever wondered about that? Where does that get? So I like to watch a lot of local news, and I've wondered. I know the breakdown of where the tax money goes because it's detailed in the law. But if you don't, that's about to be covered in this segment. But I had always wondered, like, how do you see where that money actually goes? What are the balances of those funds, et cetera, et cetera? And this video does an amazing job of breaking all of that down. So what we're going to be watching is a segment from Illinois in Focus Daily, which is, as you might have guessed, a daily show brought to you by the Center Square. I highly recommend checking it out and subscribing. I think they do a pretty good job of covering a lot of local news that you may not see anywhere else. And like I say, it's daily and it's live, so you can interact with it, interact with the show, just like you can with this show. So let's watch this segment of Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm curious what you all think about this.
Illinois legalized cannabis for medicinal use, like 9 years ago. In 2020, Illinois started the year with legal recreational cannabis, and the taxes on that can be upwards to 40+%, if not more, depending on the potency. But then you also have hemp in the equation, and the hemp industry looking to protect themselves from what they say could be the cannabis industry trying to shut them down. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, editor at the Center Square for the state of Illinois. Go get the headlines in your inbox each and every weekday morning at thecentersquare.com. Just click on newsletter and you'll be able to find that. So last week, we didn't get a chance to unpack this, but it's going to be one of many across the state roundtables, panel discussions about the hemp industry and what they say are the need for common sense regulations. Because right now, there's not much regulation on hemp, except for it has to be under a certain threshold of THC to be considered hemp. But the products that are being derived, vast. You can get textiles out of it, paper products, clothing products, rope, all kinds of different textiles. You can get oils out of it, oils that might have some kind of, claims of medicinal use. You might find edibles and gummies and the CBD, the cannabinoids that spurred onto the market. But there's also concerns about some of the derivatives like Delta 8, and it's a mild intoxicating substance that's, some are concerned, are being targeted towards young people because of how they're packaged. So there's been an effort over the past year and a half or 2 years to regulate hemp, and even Governor J.B. Pritzker getting into it to a point last year where he was supporting a measure to put a lot of regulation.
So I wanted to speak up here because just briefly interject, and we'll keep watching this clip. But he mentioned all the different uses for hemp. I really like this old video I found from like the 1990s that talks about some of the uses for hemp. And given what we've discussed in this show so far, I think you might find this clip interesting.
Most of this week's program is about a common plant, hemp. Hemp is a plant that has been illegal to grow in the United States since 1937. One of the uses for the hemp plant is marijuana. There are also many other uses for hemp, including making paper.
So you rarely hear it stated that way, but it was interesting to hear one of the uses of the hemp plant is marijuana. It's just, I'll play that little moment again.
One of the uses for the hemp plant is marijuana.
Usually, if you hear people talking about this and they're talking about it from, with that knowledge of the law, like I try to approach it with, you hear them say, we're talking about cannabis, and then we're talking about hemp, and then we're talking about marijuana. And I will say, most people, when they think of hemp, they think of rope. But anyways, I just thought that was interesting. Let's get back into this segment with Greg Bishop.
Regulate hemp, and even Governor J.B. Pritzker getting into it to a point last year where he was supporting a measure to put a lot of regulations on hemp. But the hemp industry says that those regulations were meant to shut the industry down, which would only favor the cannabis industry. So instead, they're looking for some regulations. So that's why they're starting these conversations across the state. State Representative Shawn Ford, he helped organize this, and he's going to be part of these conversations across the state. They started in Chicago on Thursday last week. And they had one of the panelists from the Illinois Healthy Choices Association, the Illinois Healthy Alternatives Association, Craig Katz. He talked about, hemp versus cannabis.
Marijuana and hemp are both parts of the cannabis plant, so it gets a little confusing sometimes for most people to differentiate between those two areas of the same plant. They both derive from the cannabis sativa L plant, and the difference is primarily in the potency of the products. The marijuana products are more potent than the hemp products, and the other difference is that the marijuana products are federally illegal. They are a Schedule I narcotic, and so the state of Illinois had to pass a specific regulation to allow for both the medical sales and the recreational sales of those products. Hemp, on the other hand, is a federally legal product as long as it meets the federally legal standard of 0.3% by dry weight of THC. So consequently, the hemp industry in Illinois and for the most part across the United States is a legal industry.
So, with it being a legal industry, you've got to ask yourself who has access to it. If people are making hemp cigarettes, people making hemp drinks. I was at a grocery store over the weekend and was kind of taken aback. This grocery store had a whole section of hemp infused drinks. And on those drinks, they were all made in Illinois, even some made in Springfield. These hemp infused drinks are at grocery stores, and they say on the can, got to be 21 to purchase. But is that part of the regulation here? Katz says that, yes, the age issue is something that is being discussed, and it's an important one because the goal is to protect youth.
Thank you, Craig. We can't let you off the hook without me asking one question before we go to JD McCormick. And the question is, why is it so difficult to at least I heard you speak about we need to protect the minors. Why is it so difficult for us to at least pass a law to at least regulate the age?
The answer to that question is I honestly can't tell you why we can't get legislators, whether it's state legislators, federal legislators, local elected officials, on the same page, because it seems to me that it's an issue that no one should object to. Everyone should want to protect children. And that's one of our primary goals, is to protect children. The problem is, I think, to some extent, it's become a political football, and you get different sides of the aisle that want to make a statement in one way, shape, or form, and their approach to making that statement varies according to what their philosophies are politically. The age gating issue is one of the primary issues, and that is to keep these products available only to people who are 21 years or older, with a possible exception of military veterans between the ages of 18 and 21. Our philosophy on that is, if you're old enough to fight for the country, then you should be old enough to make a decision as to what products you can use.
Again, that's Craig Katz with the Illinois Healthy Alternatives Association, representing hemp industry actors to get common sense regulations. They say they don't want regulations that ban hemp, because they say that would put out family farms and a whole host of jobs, also profits and economic impact and so on. But what they're pushing for is to be able to still operate, but with some oversight and maybe even some taxation in the mix. When I talked with Katz a couple of months ago about this, they were open to the idea of having a taxing scheme similar to what the marijuana tax is. And we'll look at some of the marijuana tax money just to show you how big of a line item it is in state taxes, and kind of look at where some of that money's going here in a moment. But you've got Katz talking about the possible need of local ordinances.
Thank you, Craig. We can't let you off the hook without me.
Let me get it. There you go.
And so we do that on an individual basis. For instance, in the city of Chicago right now, we are working with various aldermen to enact a city ordinance that will regulate hemp along the same lines as we discussed earlier, which is the age gating, the testing, and the packaging and labeling of products. We have an alderman in Chicago who's planning on presenting an ordinance next week, and it's an ordinance that will regulate the industry of the city, but also another issue that many municipalities and even states find attractive is the fact that there is a taxation aspect to any ordinance or regulation that gets passed. And in this time where we are always searching for new revenue sources and revenue streams to help government fund many programs, it's an opportunity for the government to regulate the industry as well as to derive revenue from the industry and make it more palatable for everyone across the board.
He's talking about taxation and how to go about, how those funds could be used, right? I mean, so that's just the hemp product that they're talking about with possible regulations. Cannabis, again, hemp is in the cannabis family. The marijuana taxes, that's where you can kind of look at where that money's going and just how much is being brought in on a state level. All right. So Illinois has a cannabis, adult recreational cannabis program with taxes upwards to 40+%, depending on the potency. Brings in a lot of money. This is a billion-dollar industry. We're not looking at the profits that the cannabis growers and sellers are getting from all of this, but we're just going to look at some of the tax revenue that the state's collecting on all of this. So if you go to the Illinois Comptroller's website and you look at the special funds that they have, the fund search, if you just type in cannabis, you'll see that there are 5 different funds for cannabis. Let's look at the cannabis development, a business development fund, for instance. That's got $56 million in it. So that's derived from cannabis taxes. Let's look up some more cannabis expungement. A fund to help people get their cannabis charges expunged, $3.6 million. Let's take a look at some other cannabis funds that there are. Regulation, how much is in that regulation fund? You've got $8.1 million. And then I think one more. We'll just see what the cannabis use of compassionate use of medical cannabis. That also has some tax revenue to it. They've got almost $68 million.
So I'm going to pause it right there and encourage you to check out the rest of that video if you found it interesting. I think it's super interesting to see where the tax dollars are going. And while I am, pretty well opposed to taxing cannabis as much as it is or at all, I do think they are speaking at least one lawmaker's language. And again, as I mentioned, Representative Shawn Ford is one of the legislators pushing, or I guess sponsoring, this legislation. And here's just a segment of what LaShawn Ford had to say when I discussed this subject matter with him on my show in the past.
Could be if we could regulate it.
And what do you think the answer is? I personally think it's as simple as ID. You got to be 21, testing, and labeling.
That's it. Oh, don't forget now. We got to collect revenue. I need to get some taxes.
Now, but does that mean that it's going to be limited to the dispensaries, or will it continue like a chai tiva?
Right. I think that it would be just as you said it, those three, and we just need to make sure that we could tax it. I'm a Democrat, and I think that we have to tax it the way cannabis is taxed so that it could be an equal playing field. You cannot allow for people that sell an intoxicating drug to be in the industry, and cannabis is in the industry, and they spend a lot of money and time to set up and become a thing in Illinois, and you have this competing intoxicant out there that's not taxed and regulated the same. And so I want to be fair to the cannabis industry and say what's good for cannabis should be good for Delta. So
cool.
So you can check out that full interview. I'll have it linked in the show notes. It's a interesting conversation. We don't only talk about hemp and marijuana / cannabis. We also talk about psychedelic policy in Illinois, or at least what it was looking like at the time. That was actually just about a year ago. Oh, wow. Just about 2 years ago from this coming Tuesday. So that interview, well, it was released on July 22nd, 2023. I'm pretty sure I recorded it sometime in June, but that's crazy. That's how long ago that interview is from. But again, I show that clip to sort of give you a better idea of at least this lawmaker, LaShawn Ford, how he seems to be approaching this topic. He doesn't seem to see it as just a 3-pillar approach. I think he sees it as sort of a 4-pillar approach. And that 4th pillar is taxing the cannabis products that are created under that are basically compliant with that farm bill. So folks, I hope you have found value in this episode of the Cole Memo. If you didn't catch the live stream and want to catch it in the future, once again, go to colememo.com/YouTube. Drop your comments if you'd like me to answer any questions that you all have, or let me know, what you think. We discussed a wide-ranging set of topics today. So if you're just tuning in now and you missed the beginning of the show, you missed us talking about the fact that Texas is going to have a special session, and not like a smoke session, although I'm sure there will be people smoking there. They'll be having a special legislative session that was originally scheduled. From what I understand, it was originally going to be called for to regulate hemp, but because there were some disasters in Texas, I believe the correct term is natural disasters like floods and stuff, they are also going to try to be addressing that subject matter during this special session. But from what I understand, a lot of the focus was going to be on regulating hemp products, or I guess the real debate in Texas seems to be to regulate or not to regulate. The governor seems to be indicating that it should be regulated. The lieutenant governor has indicated that he believes it should be completely banned. All THC products should be completely banned. And so it'll be interesting to see how things play out next week. So we discussed that. We discussed federal news, which is that the HALT Act, which was signed into law, which basically makes fentanyl-related substances Schedule 1 now. Fentanyl itself remains Schedule 2 in a medical setting. And Brandon just commented regarding Texas, saying Hometown Hero announced earlier on a video I've seen that the special session may not happen. I think I saw that video, and yeah, so whatever happens, it's definitely going to be interesting. All eyes are on Texas, and yeah, I'll be sure to keep you all informed on what transpires, at least what I hear, and we'll have our boots on the ground Texas people back on the show in the future. So like I was saying, fentanyl remains Schedule 2 in a medical setting. Fentanyl-related substances now are going to be Schedule 1, and there are going to be higher penalties for those substances. And my personal commentary is that I'm a little worried about how that's going to play out because of the iron law of prohibition. And if you're not familiar, I'd say Google it. But in a nutshell, what it basically is the idea that the harder the enforcement, the harder drugs become. And so we need to strike some balance. Prohibition does not work. And so we'll definitely have to figure out a way to strike some balance here so that the problem doesn't get worse. That's my primary concern. We can all agree that the problem is bad. I don't want the problem to become worse. We closed out the show with some talk on intoxicating hemp, as some people call it. I call it descheduled cannabis. We kind of tried to lay out how there are different factions. There are people that are completely opposed to hemp for moral reasons. There are people that are completely opposed to hemp for business reasons. There are people that are in hemp but think it should be regulated a certain way. People that are in hemp that believe it should be regulated another way. And, I'm sure there are more possibilities of where people stand on this topic. So lots of disagreement. It'll just definitely be interesting to see how this all plays out. Never thought I'd see a drug policy debate like this, and that's why I continue to cover it for you all. We closed out the show with some talk about where the cannabis tax dollars go in Illinois. And once again, I will be sure to link that episode or segment of Illinois in Focus Daily so that you can watch the whole thing if you found some of that interesting. I just really found value in the part where he was going through the new, I believe it was the new Illinois General Assembly website, and was showing the dollar amounts for each fund. Like the medical cannabis fund, I think he said had like $67 million in it or something like that. So it's like good to keep track of those things, especially if you find where your tax dollars going to be interesting. And it kind of makes me want to figure out like where my other dollars are going, and it's like you learn things like this with cannabis, and then you can apply it to other real world topics and see where the hell your money is going and how they're spending it. I think it's interesting. It can get a little muddy in between point A and point B, but I'm curious, and so that's why I find this all interesting. And I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found value in this episode of the Cole Memo. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe, and I appreciate you all for tuning in. I'm checking right now, and it looks like we have 26 viewers. Some people on YouTube, some people on Twitter, and some people on Instagram. And I don't think the Instagram count is included in this. So approximately 26, maybe a little bit more. That's pretty cool. Thank you all for tuning in live. I appreciate you all, and stay tuned for more content to come out. I'll try to be better about announcing live streams in the future so that we can all plan accordingly. But in any case, I'm glad that all of you were able to join me now. And if you're watching this after the fact, thank you for taking the time to watch this episode of the Cole Memo. Take care. We'll see you.